That's a really good question, and it depends. Because in my current job, I use SQL way more than what I use Excel, and I don't use Power BI. I use Epic, and I make Epic dashboards. But in my previous job, I would use a lot of Excel and I would use a lot of R. And before that job, I didn't use Excel or R as much. I used, actually, no, it's a lie. I used Excel and SPSS. And so the main thing for me that always stuck around was using Excel. I used Excel in my first position, I used Excel in my second position, and I use Excel now. Do I use the same tools? No. So in my current job, I don't really use R a lot. It's just if I want to use it on my own. But it's not required to know R. What's my bread and butter is SQL. I used R just for me not to lose my skills, which I mostly just do it on my own time. So I don't use R for anything in my job. I don't use SPSS for anything in my job. In my previous job, I didn't use SPSS. I used R and Excel. And I didn't use SQL. And then in my first job, I used Excel and SPSS, and I did use R, but that was on my own, and it was not required for the job because my cohort of teammates used SPSS that didn't use R. So I used the default of what everybody used, and anytime I used R was just on my own. So if I wanted to do my own analysis and present that where it wouldn't impact my team, I would use R. But everybody in my cohort used SPSS, and that's what I mostly used. So, but the main common factor here, like the main trend here, is I always use Excel no matter where I went. And so that's why I would suggest starting with Excel, knowing how to use it, and then going on to those other things. Now, if you're trying to go into data analysis, for me, my bread and butter, and from what I've seen in a lot of job positions, is SQL. So learn Excel and learn SQL. If you want to do SQL first and then Excel, you could go right ahead. It's just like your testing when they do a coding test on you would be in SQL. It won't be in Excel, but they sort of would have the expectation that you already know how to use Excel. So in the end, it just depends on what position you're applying for and where you're at. Um, and just look at the job descriptions of what they want, but do know that they will think that you know how to use Excel. So if you're like, hey, I know how to use SQL, they're going to expect that of you. Now, if you go for a very entry level job where they don't require you to know SQL, it's just do analysis with Excel. Your coding Excel, I don't know, your test would be on Excel if they give you one of those. There is positions where they're like that, where it's like old school, they don't have any databases, like their databases are Excel, sheets and sheets of Excel, and so they require someone to be like an Excel master, which that exists. It's not my thing. Once I hear that they have that's what they use, I withdraw my application. It's just hard, and for those of you that know, But yeah, that's why I suggest Excel first, and learning that, like, if you do not know anything, Excel first, and then move on to SQL. Thanks for the question. Peace, love, and happiness.